Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through my process of printing and painting this hazmat suit wearing character from the game Rust. Now, for anyone who might not know what Rust is, a quick Google search describes it as a multiplayer survival game developed by Facepunch Studios. And the main object of Rust is to survive in the wilderness using gathered or stolen materials. It was first released back in December 2013 to Steam Early Access. Now myself, I'm not a massive player of the game. I've dabbled in it once or twice and had a good time whilst playing it, but it was never something that really grabbed me. My dad, on the other hand, well, he loves the game. And this is what gave me the idea to try printing and painting this model. So a big thanks to Dad for the inspiration. I hope you like it. With all that being said, let's get into it. The first thing I had to do as usual was to find the file. So I did a quick search and having a look around, and I found one or two files to choose from. I settled on this file as it came with a base and it was perfect for the project that I wanted to do. Now, this wasn't my first time printing the Rust hazmat fella. A few years ago, I had printed a smaller version that I painted up, and I made a back-end card for it, complete with a clamshell that would resemble a collectible figure. This time, however, I wanted to go big. My previous print, I was limited to the size of my printer, but now I have a moderate-sized printer. I keep wanting to push the boundaries of how big I can go with everything, and it makes a nice change from all the miniatures that I'm used to printing on the regular. First things first then, I tried to see how big I could print this guy off in one go. The file I had downloaded was huge though, and I would have to scale it down loads to be able to print it off in one go. This meant I had to slice the file up into multiple parts that I could then print smaller and then glue together later on. Now, I'm no stranger to using Blender to help me with this task, as I've done it once or twice before, but I haven't done it enough yet to make it second nature. So I jumped onto YouTube to have a look at some tutorials again, and I just want to say a big thank you to the channel Not Very Good Guy and his video Blender. The how to cut and key a model for 3D printing has been a lifesaver, and I always go back to it because I know it works and it teaches me what to do, and because I could just never remember it. So big thank you again to Not Very Good Guy. The video I was using then was quick, to the point, and short enough that it gave me everything I needed, and it was really easy to jump back and forth when I kept forgetting what to do. Having the knowledge and tools, I had to decide though how I was going to split the model up. My first step was to cut the base off and make that a single file, as it was the biggest part, and I knew it would probably be the best place to start for knowing how big I could print the model. After that then, it was pretty straightforward. Cut the body in half and remove the arms. Once I'd successfully done all of this preparation, I saved the files down as separate STLs and opened up Lychee. As previously mentioned, I dropped the base in first and made it as big as I could. Now at this point though, I did consider, should I split the base into two and make it a larger print? But I felt like that would cause me too much hassle when putting it back together, so I decided not to do that and stick to what I had. I hollowed it out and I got it ready to print. After hours and days of printing, I'm super happy to say that all the prints came out first time. There was no issues or print failures to contend with. After removing the supports and curing them, I wanted to do a quick test fit before sanding them down and cleaning them up properly. Before I clean them up then, let's just have a quick look at each individual piece. Now they've all come out really well. There's a little bit of some problems around the edge of the base, which nothing some sanding won't take care of. But as you can see, there's all the drainage holes, so each of these pieces have been printed hollow. It just saves on time and resources basically. But the details again, I mean that cable there, it flexes quite nicely, and even the shoulder straps have come out really well, even though they're so thin. There's a little bit on the shoulder here where it's sort of missing, it hasn't fully printed. But I was really surprised that the bits, attached to the tank actually came out quite well. And a quick look at the legs as well. You know, that was not much detail on the legs, so they've come out really well. As you can see, the little pieces I've added in Blender, and also the piece that I've subtracted from Blender to make it go back together, have all come out really nicely. And a quick look at his other arm. So this was actually attached in the model itself, so the fingers were attached to the legs. I've had to slice it through the fingers as well as at the forearm. And the last piece is the arm holding the gun. And again, the details on the gun have come out really well. I was quite surprised again, and did break off. I think there's a little bit of damage on the sight there, but for me that just adds to the whole model because it's sort of like a, you know, post-apocalyptic wasteland type thing. So I can get away with that, I feel like. That's my excuse anyway. Haha. Now, before I went and sanded it all down so I could glue it all together, I wanted to do a quick test fit just to see how well it went together before the sanding down and the actual trying to fit it all together properly. And as you can see, even just having the supports removed and having it cured, it actually goes together pretty well. So I was quite impressed by that. That's pretty awesome. Before I started sanding it down then, I just sort of prepped it a little bit more by just going around and trying to remove any of the excess supports that were left over. So when the supports get removed from the model, they sometimes leave like these little nubbins and they just sort of poke out, and it just makes the whole sanding process a little bit easier. So what I tend to do is just grab my scalpel blade and go around and try and cut off as many as I can find. I also missed a lot of supports, so full-on supports that were still attached to the models, or the model themselves, so all the pieces. So I just went through with my clippers and I basically just removed any of the excess that was left over. When it came to the sanding then, I had two methods. So I had these little sanding sticks that I used, and I also had the sandpaper. For different areas. So the sanding sticks, I was using, I think it was a 60 grit, and I mostly will try to use it on the parts where the model was going to join together. So I wanted to use the little stick just to really try and sand it down nicely so I'd get a sort of smoother fit when I tried to glue all the pieces back together. And then the sanding paper itself, I went through different types of grit. I can't actually remember which ones I used now, but I use a varied amount of them, and I basically just went through and just tried to smooth everything down across all the detailed parts. And this base, it took a while. The base, I don't know why it came out like it did. I think it was mostly the supports that caused this issue, but I really wanted the base to have a nice sort of smoother finish, so I spent a lot of time trying to sand that part down. And then for the rest of the parts, it was basically just going through, and it was mostly where I'd cut off all the nubbins that I'd previously mentioned, where the supports have left some scarring on the pieces. I just took the sandpaper and just filed down basically all the parts where the supports had touched it, and just got a nice finish. So it took a while, and like I said, I went through different sort of grades of sandpaper. Started pretty rough to get rid of the little nubbin parts first, and then just worked my way up just to smooth it all out. After what felt like an eternity trying to sand all that stuff down then, I finally got it to a place I was happy with. I'd been doing little dry fits here and there as I was sanding it down just to make sure it looked like it was all going to go together well enough. When I was happy with it then, the next stage was to glue it all together. So in my head, what I had planned was to start by super gluing it all together, and then use a method that I'd seen on the internet. I've seen it in quite a few videos nowadays, and I thought I wanted to give it a try. So something new for me to try, which I always like doing. And that method would be where you take the resin fresh out of the bottle, take some resin, you get a little toothpick or something similar, and what you do is you apply it to the joints and all the cracks where you've glued the model together. And what you do is you try and get it into there as best as you can, and then the idea is you cure it using like a UV torch or something similar. And once the resin's cured, the idea being that you go back and you sand it all down, and it should hopefully just sort of mask and cover up all the parts where you've glued the model together. This was my theory, and this is what I wanted to try. Moving on to that method then, I grabbed my resin and I was using the high-speed resin from Anycubic for this. So I did the whole print in this actually, I don't know if I mentioned that part. But as you can see, I just dropped some into a spare cap I had. I grabbed my toothpick and then all I did was try and just sort of push some of the fresh resin into some of the cracks. And then I had a little UV torch on hand and I would just try and cure it as I went along. So here's just a quick close-up of him then after doing this method. So I've got the resin all in to the joints and everything, and I used my UV torch on it. And for the most part, I think it was actually cured, but it did look a little bit wet still, so I wasn't fully convinced. So I thought, just to put my mind at ease, I'll bug him in the wash and cure station just to sort of just make sure it is all done and it's ready to move on to the next stage. Once I was happy all the resin had been cured, I moved on to the next step, and this was getting it prepped for painting. So after I'd finished curing all the resin, I just went over it quickly again with some more sanding and just smoothed out everything. And then I picked up this filler primer. And I did this because I was hoping that A, it would give it a nice base coat, and B, if it did actually highlight any issues or any parts of the model where I might have missed putting it together with the resin, that I'd hopefully be able to, again, sort of go back through, sand it all down, and just completely get rid of any of the lines where the model's gone together. Luckily for me, I think I did a pretty bang up job when I did the resin part, so there was no need to go back through and actually use the filler primer to actually help fill in any gaps. So it was straight on to the painting side of it. I cracked out the airbrush and I got my yellow paint ready. Now, I'm not very good with airbrushes. I've only ever mainly used them to base my models, and I don't do anything fancy with them. So all I ever use them for is to just apply, like, you know, one solid color. So in this case, you know, that I was in my element. So yeah, I applied the yellow, did a few coats of this until I was happy. Once I was happy with the base coat of the yellow, then I moved on to the base itself. Now, I had an idea about how I wanted to do the base. So my idea was to get this, I'm going to say base again, base coloured with a brown, because I was going to do it a sort of earthy kind of look with all the rocks and stuff he stood on. So yeah, I just used a brown, just smashed that out, got that all based. So I based the base with a basing colour of a brown to base it after I based it yellow. Base. After laying down the initial colours with my airbrush then, it was time to move on to painting the model properly or fully. And for this I opted to do it by hand because I do a lot more stuff by hand. Like I said, I'm not very good with an airbrush, so I just opted to do it this way. I thought it'd be easier. So I got my paints out ready and we started with the Wellington boot. For this I used Citadel acrylic paints because that's what I mostly own, so I found a good colour that I thought sort of matched what it looked like in the artwork. And with a big brush, I just covered most of the area before coming in with a smaller one just to neaten up the edges. After the boot was done, I decided to add the blue. And I'm not actually sure what the blue is meant to be honest. But at a guess, it sort of looks like a different material that's sort of been added into the hazmat suit to patch up holes, maybe, just sort of keep it together. Because as you can tell from the images, and if you know Rust, it's obviously not a brand new hazmat suit. It's obviously been worn for a while and has been touched up to sort of keep it together with the duct tape and everything on it. But again, I used acrylic Citadel paints just to get this job done. And as you saw just then, putting my fingers in the wet paint was a good lesson and reminder to be careful going forwards. So luckily I did that at such an early stage that I kind of, it helped me remember when I was doing the rest of the model later on to just watch where I hold it, or even better, maybe just let it dry first. But that's not what I'm about. Next stop on the paint train was the black areas. So this would include his mask visor, the pipes coming out of it, the little bit of cable or rope or whatever it is, whatever he's got around his waist. And I'd also forgotten, you'll see that I forgot to paint the gun and his glove at this point. But I do eventually remember to come back around and do that a little bit later on. After doing all the black then, I moved on to the hooded helmety area. We used another Citadel paint to apply this. It was just a red, and I did thin down my paints for the process just to sort of get a nice coverage, but not as much as I would do when I'm painting any miniatures. If you know, when you paint your miniatures, it's always better to thin these paints down because they can go on a little thick, but with something bigger with less detail, I didn't really feel the need to do that on this one, so I just kind of got a little bit of water in to help it spread, and then just slapped it on and just applied 1 or 2 coats until I was happy. It was around about this point that I had my first little break on the model. So one of the little straps for his backpack, which was, I must admit, printed quite thinly, and I'm surprised it did come out how it did. As I was manhandling it, it did snap off, as you can see. But I was too far invested in it at this point to be like, yeah, okay, I'll go back or reprint it or anything. I figured I'll just for this time round, I can live with that. We'll just deal with it and move on. So swinging back around to get the gun base coated and to paint the glove that I missed, I used a black acrylic from Vallejo, so it's the same one that I used earlier on all of the other black areas. I don't think I mentioned it was Vallejo instead of Citadel, but I found the coverage of this paint to be sort of satisfyingly good. So I prefer this over some of the Citadel stuff, but not the finish. So it's got a bit of a glossy finish for my liking, but it does the trick when needed. And like I say, for something a bit bigger than this, it covered really well. With most of the character base coated now, I started to add some grey to the rocks and the stones on the base. I just wanted to break it up a little bit because my plan was to put some colour on the rocks, sort of maybe give them a wash, give them some depth and colours and stuff, and then what I was going to do is I'm going to base it at the end, as you'll see. And sticking with that same grey, I also used it to paint the tube that runs from the oxygen tank on his back. So I nearly completely forgot about the other boot, and the other boot is a different shade of yellow to the suit, so it's actually a lighter shade of yellow. So I just grabbed another Citadel paint, and I was going to thin it down like I probably should have, because you know, yellow goes on, it's quite streaky and horrible, but I decided not to. I thought I could maybe get a thicker layer on, just slap it on there, and then if I wanted to I could just tidy it up later on depending on how it went on. And it did go on a bit thick and a bit streaky, so I did swing by later once it dried and apply a couple of thinner layers just to sort of neaten it up a little bit. I applied a silver over all of the oxygen tank. Wow, that's nearly seemed hard to say. An oxygen tank over the oxygen tank. And then I attempted to freehand the silver tape, or the silver duct tape that he's clearly used to keep the rest of his suit together. So either patch up some holes or whatever's been going on with it, isn't it? Adding all that extra material in that I mentioned earlier, sort of the blues and the stuff. So I used a picture for reference to try and copy it like for like as best I could, and I enjoyed this part actually. It was a bit difficult at times trying to get the right shapes for the, to make it keep looking like tape. Make it keep looking like tape, is that English? Make it look like tape, so instead of just patches of silver paint onto a model. It was quite interesting to try and keep a straight line, try and make it look like each part was individual, and try and give it sort of a torn look as well at the end of each bit, like he'd ripped it off and just stuck it on, rather than it looking like flat solid pieces of well painted silver onto a model. And this is the last stage then I had before I was going to shade the model and sort of, give it a bit more depth and everything to the paint, rather than just leaving it as a solid colour. And my initial thoughts were I was going to do it the way I always do my minis, add a wash onto it, so an actual wash that you can buy store-bought, or you thin down your paints and then you apply it on. But the only problem I was thinking of that, the problem I had with that idea was that it could leave really sort of streaky, like a streaky mess across the model. Sometimes the way they dry, it might not look very good, and obviously being a larger model it'd be more obvious, and there'd be more cleanup time as well, because you have to apply it, the shade, let it dry, and then I'd have to come back and start topping it up. And so say with the yellow, I'd apply maybe a darker yellow or a brown, and then have to come back and tidy it all up. So I started thinking of other ideas, and because I'm not very accustomed to painting larger models yet, I did have the thought that in recent times I've been painting some necromunda tiles, and the method I've used for that was oil washes, where you take your oil paints, you thin them down, you apply them all over the model, and what you do is just let them dry for a little bit, and then you come back and then you just sort of kind of wipe away all the excess. And what it should do, or what it can do, is leave you a nice sort of shaded model, or whatever you've put it onto. Just sort of it stays in the recessed areas and gives you almost like I'd say a natural blending as well. It kind of blends into the model quite nicely and just shades it for you. However, tragedy struck. Now, I had them off to the side as I was doing some other stuff at one point, and I went to reach for something on my desk, and could you believe it, I managed to just punch the barrel of the gun clean off, and this is the result. So it was luckily a clean break, so it was a quick and easy fix with some super glue, I throw a bit of paint on, and you'll never know, but it was very frustrating. Here's a quick look at him then. Now I've finished all the painting and blocking all the colours in preparation for the oil wash. This is how he is, and what I'm going to have to do as well at this point is I'm going to have to spray him and coat him in an acrylic varnish. So all this will do is hopefully prevent all the acrylic paints that I've just applied to him from the wash I'm about to do, because I'm going to have to use some white spirit and the oil paints and everything and sort of remove stuff. So I'm going to use this can of acrylic varnish from Humbrol, and all I'll do is just give it a once over just to seal all of the acrylics to the model, and hopefully that should protect the paints going forward. On to the next stage then, which was the oil wash, as I previously mentioned. Now to do this method, first I needed a bottle to mix my wash up into, and I had this old bottle from Games Workshop, which was perfect. Next was my colour, and for this I used burnt umber oil paint. I don't think it matters what brand you would use, but I'm using the Winsor & Newton one, but that's mostly because it was just the first thing I came across in the store. Next I made sure I had my trusty pipette to hand. This is how I'll be transferring the white spirit and controlling how much I add to my mix. And because I'm working with oils and white spirit, I have some latex gloves and a respirator, as the fumes and the smell from the white spirit can be quite intense if you're using it over a long period of time. Normally I would use a low odour solvent, but I had run out at this point and opted for what I had laying around. Oh, and lastly, of course, you need a paintbrush. I needed a paintbrush for this, and this was the paintbrush I had. It was just some old thing I picked up out of a set that I got cheaply from a hobby store. Can't remember which one. But yeah, it'll do. I just need it to apply the wash onto it, so it doesn't have to be anything too fancy, and it doesn't matter if it gets damaged or not. As mentioned, I used a white spirit to remove the paint. I had two versions, a regular white spirit and this one called clean spirit that I picked up. I was hoping it would be similar to the odorless ones you can buy, as it does say virtually odorless on the bottle, but I'd never tried it before. I believe the one I had beforehand was a Winsor & Newton little bottle that you can get. The method then for creating the wash is just to drop some oil into the empty bottle. Grab the pipette and add the white spirit to it, and then give it a good shake. Now for the mix itself, I didn't actually have any sort of ratios for this. I was just literally guessworking it and eyeballing it. But from my experience, it's more about how much spirit you add to it to thin it out, because you don't want it going on too thick and gloopy and getting chunks of it stuck. You want it really shaken up very well, nice and thin, so it'll apply nicely and settle onto the surfaces quite well. If you don't get a good consistency, it can be lumpy sometimes and you get thick chunks of oil paint and stuff that hasn't separated. So give it a healthy amount of white spirit to make up your mix, and then I just kept testing it really until I was happy with the consistency. I wouldn't even know how to describe the consistency, just what I thought was right really. Once I got my wash all sorted then and I was happy with how it looked, next came the fun part. Now this was probably the easiest and possibly the funnest part of the entire process, because it was literally just slapping the wash on all over the model and covering it entirely head to toe. So literally just finding a paintbrush, dipping it all into the wash, and then just completely smothering the model in every nook and cranny I could find until it was all covered. And then that's where I would leave it for about half an hour to an hour, sort of somewhere between there, just to let the paint dry a little bit. You don't want it to dry all the way, or saying that, oil paints take ages to dry, don't they? So it could probably take days for it to dry, but a good half an hour to an hour or so is kind of what I gave this one, just to see how it would be. And yeah, that seemed to be the right amount of time, to be honest. So yeah, I sort of got that right, I guess. After I'd let the paint dry then, so for about the sort of half hour to an hour that I said, I then came back through and it was time to remove it. So what I did to remove it was, as you can see, just dipped in some sort of just some paper towel into the white spirit, just added that to it, and then just went round and gently removed all the surface paint that I could using the paper towel. Just going over all the raised areas, trying to leave as much of it in recessed areas as I could. Not consciously, because it should really just sort of do it itself. Like I say, if you just take the paper towel over the surface of it, it should just get rid of all the excess on the top areas of it all and sort of leave it in the recesses, which was the idea anyway, hopefully to give it some natural shading. Once I was done with removing all the sort of surface stuff using the towel, I then got some cotton buds to try and get into some of the areas that I couldn't get the paper towel into, and just sort of tidy it up a little bit. And you can sort of blend it a little bit more as well, because what you can do is you can kind of use the cotton buds to move the paint around as it reactivates with the white spirit. But for the most part, I was just trying to get into areas that I couldn't quite reach with the paper towel and just sort of tidy it all up again. With all that taken care of then, that's the painting done, that's the shading done, and now it's time for the final step, and that is to do the base. Now I already had this box of base and material lying around because I use it for some of my other models and stuff that I do, but I didn't make this, so this is actually bought pre-made from a website called Geek Gaming Scenics. If you've never seen or been to their website before, I highly recommend it. They've got loads of different base and materials to choose from, as well as other stuff that they do. So the other thing I'm going to need is PVA glue, because we're going to go proper old school arts and crafts, and we're just going to put the PVA glue all over and just drop all the basing material onto it. Simple as. So I grabbed a little cup, or a little lid in fact. So I was just using a lid off of an old spray can that I had, and I just poured some PVA into there, and then I just got another old brush from the same set, and then I just moved the PVA around all of the base wherever I wanted it to go. Simple as. And like previously mentioned, I grabbed all the basing material and then just started to chuck it on. Just randomly, just pinch it here, drop it on, just spread it around, get some of the rocks in there, just try and mix it all up nicely. And then what I did was I just left it overnight. So just to make sure that the glue really dried, just leave it for the night, let it all dry out, come back the next morning and obviously just sort of tip off all the excess and all the stuff that hasn't stuck down, and then tidy it all up. And we've come to the end then, so this is the final result, and I have to say, I'm very happy with how this has come out. So the project as a whole has been an absolute blast to do, and it's been so much fun to do. I've really enjoyed doing this project actually, and but what also adds to it as well is the fact that by the time I have finished making this video, editing it, getting it all uploaded and everything, my dad, who I made this for, actually has it on display already and is a big fan of it. So to be honest, that is the best part about this whole thing, is the fact that he actually loves it as well. Now, I just wanted to give a special mention to the base, because at the end of it, I was actually really impressed with how that came out. I'm not taking full credit for that one because of the basing stuff I used, but I think it really added to the overall effect. So I'm glad I used that in the end, and that was, after all of that actually, that was one of my favourite parts about it. So, and the fact that I decided to paint the rim black as well, just to sort of, I think it gave it a better finish and sort of made it look a bit more like a display piece, I would say. There was one random thing that I noticed at the end, so sort of whilst I was messing around with it and sort of just checking it over and that, one of these fingers here, I never noticed this before, so I had to go back into the file and just double check whether it was a misprint or it was actually on the file. But if you can see his ring finger there, it's all askew with. It's it looked like it was a print failure, but like I said, looking at this, you can actually see it is part of the 3D model itself. So I'm not sure what happened there. I'm starting to wonder maybe if the whole thing was maybe just ripped straight out of the game, or whether somebody has sculpted this. I'm not actually sure, and I don't know how to find out. But it did make me laugh a little bit. I think that brings us to the end of the video then. There's not much more I can really say on it, other than I consider this a success. There are little things I would change again and be careful with, like the breaking of the strap there, and possibly, some of the other bits that did snap off. But you know, it's I'd say it's a learning curve, isn't it? I'm still happy with how it came out, considering it all went off mostly without a hitch. The printing, like I said, came out pretty much spot on first go, so I'll take it as a win. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. Hopefully, I'll see you all again sometime. Until then, keep collecting. Bye.